It was one of those ordinary afternoons in a busy shopping center parking lot in San Diego. Sun high, cars crawling in slow circles looking for a spot, the kind of place where nothing exciting ever happens. But that day, everything changed in just a few minutes. A black man in his mid-30s pulled into a parking space near the entrance. He moved carefully, gripping the door frame as he stepped out. You could see he wasn't just tired. He carried the kind of weariness that comes from pushing through pain every single day. On his dashboard sat a bright blue disabled parking placard, clearly visible through the windshield. He'd earned it the hard way. Years of service in the U.S. Navy, including multiple deployments and injuries that still flared up without warning. That day he'd just come from a tough physical therapy session and was looking forward to a quiet stop at the pharmacy before heading home. He hadn't even closed his car door when a silver SUV screeched to a halt a few feet away. Out stepped a man and a woman, both in their late 50s, faces already twisted in anger. The man pointed at the parking spot like it had personally offended him. "That's our spot," he barked, voice sharp with entitlement. "We were waiting for it." The Navy veteran stayed calm. He didn't raise his voice. He simply pointed to the placard on his mirror and said, "I've got a legal right to this space. I'm disabled." But that answer didn't satisfy them. In fact, it seemed to make things worse. The woman stepped forward, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "Oh, sure you are," she sneered. "Just another guy abusing the system. You don't look disabled to me," he didn't argue. He knew from experience that explaining never helped when someone had already made up their mind. He just turned to grab his bag from the back seat, hoping the moment would pass. It didn't. The man suddenly lunged forward and shoved him hard against the side of his truck. The impact knocked the wind out of him for a second. Before he could react, the woman started yelling racial slurs, words that cut deeper than any physical pain. "You think you can just take whatever you want?" she shouted. "This isn't your neighborhood." People nearby stopped walking. A teenager pulled out his phone. An older woman gasped and stepped back. But no one intervened. Not yet. The veteran, trained to stay composed in far worse situations, kept his hands open and visible. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said evenly. "I'm just here to pick up my medicine." But the man wasn't listening. Fueled by rage and something uglier beneath it, he swung. The punch landed on the veteran's jaw with a sickening thud. For a split second, instinct kicked in, the kind drilled into him through years of elite military training. His body moved before his mind could catch up, blocking the next swing with a practiced motion, but he didn't strike back. Not once. He just created space, eyes locked on his attacker's, voice still steady. "Don't do this," he warned. "You don't know who I am." That only seemed to enrage them more. "We know exactly who you are," the woman spat. "And you don't belong here." By now, a small crowd had gathered. Someone shouted, "Leave him alone." Another person yelled, "I'm recording this." The tension crackled in the hot afternoon air like a live wire. Finally, two bystanders, a construction worker in a dusty t-shirt and a young mother with a stroller, stepped between them. "Back off," the worker said firmly, putting himself between the aggressors and the veteran. "This man hasn't done anything wrong." Humiliated but still fuming, the couple stormed off toward the mall entrance, shouting threats over their shoulders. "We're calling the cops." "You'll be sorry." The veteran stood there for a moment, breathing deeply, jaw clenched against the ache. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the effort of holding himself back. He'd faced gunfire in foreign lands, endured months of recovery, and now this, being attacked in broad daylight over a parking space, simply because of the color of his skin. He walked slowly to the trunk, pulled out his phone, and dialed 911. His voice was calm as he reported the assault, giving clear details. Location, description of the couple, what they'd said and done. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't yell. He just told the truth like he always had. As he waited for the police, people started approaching him, quietly, respectfully. The teenager who'd filmed the whole thing offered the video. "You didn't deserve that, man," he said. An elderly veteran in a worn-out ball cap gave a slow, solemn nod. "Semper Fi," he murmured. The young mother handed him a bottle of water. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. He managed a small nod. "Yeah," he said. "I'll be all right." But inside, he was wrestling with something deeper than physical pain. This wasn't just about a parking spot. It was about being seen, really seen for who he was. A man who'd served his country, who lived with daily pain, who asked for nothing more than basic decency. And yet to some people none of that mattered. All they saw was his skin. The police arrived quickly. 2 officers, one young, one older, both professional. They listened carefully, took notes, asked if he wanted medical attention. He declined, but agreed to file a formal report. As they spoke, more people gathered around, not out of curiosity, but out of quiet solidarity. No one cheered. No one shouted. But their presence said everything. Meanwhile, inside the mall, the couple was still fuming. They found a bench near the food court, muttering to each other about entitled people and how things have changed. They had no idea that just a few hundred feet away, their lives were already beginning to unravel because the video was already online. The teenager had posted it to social media with a simple caption: "Watch what happens when a Navy vet gets attacked for using a disabled spot." Within minutes, it started spreading. Veterans groups shared it. Local news pages picked it up. People began recognizing the veteran, not just as a victim, but as someone they knew. He'd spoken at schools, volunteered at shelters, mentored at-risk youth. His story wasn't hidden. It was out there, woven into the community, and the couple, their luxury SUV had a vanity plate. It didn't take long for someone to trace it. Their names, jobs, even their home address began circulating, not for harassment, but for accountability. Their employers started getting calls. Neighbors whispered. Friends distanced themselves, but none of that had happened yet. In that moment, standing in the parking lot with the sun beating down and the smell of asphalt in the air, the veteran just wanted to go home. He wanted to sit on his porch, listen to the ocean in the distance, and forget that any of this had happened. He didn't know it then, but in exactly 7 minutes, 7 short minutes from the moment the assault ended, everything would shift. Not just for him, but for the couple who thought they could act without consequence. Karma doesn't always come with thunder and lightning. Sometimes it arrives quietly, like a text message, a phone call, or a knock on the door. And sometimes it moves faster than anyone expects, but for now, all he could do was wait, breathe, and hold on to his dignity, because that was the one thing they couldn't take from him, no matter how hard they tried. The moment the couple stormed off, shouting threats over their shoulders, the air in the parking lot didn't clear, it thickened. People stood frozen for a beat, like they weren't sure if it was really over. Then slowly they moved closer, not in a crowd, but one by one, like they were drawn by something quiet but powerful. The veteran stayed near his truck, rubbing his jaw where the punch had landed. It stung, but it wasn't the pain that weighed on him. It was the disbelief. He'd been in war zones where enemies showed more restraint than that man just had. At least over there, hatred had a uniform. Here it wore khakis and a golf shirt. A woman in her 60s holding a reusable grocery bag stepped forward first. "Are you all right, son?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. He gave her a small nod. "Yeah, ma'am, just..." Shook up. Then came the teenager who'd filmed everything. He held out his phone. "I got it all," he said. "Every word, every move. You didn't throw a single punch. You just defended yourself." The veteran looked at the screen. There he was, calm, hands open, backing away while the man swung at him like a wild animal. It was hard to watch. Not because it was violent, but because it was so unfair. Nearby, a man in a delivery uniform shook his head. "I've been parking here for years. I've seen people fight over spots, sure, but never like this. Never with that kind of hate in their voice." He paused, then added, "You served, didn't you?" The veteran didn't like to brag, but he nodded. Navy, 20 years, that was all it took. A quiet ripple went through the small group. One guy saluted. Another said, "Thank you for your service," not like a slogan, but like he meant it deep in his bones. But even as strangers offered kindness, the veteran's mind kept circling back to what the woman had said. Those ugly words that cut deeper than fists ever could. Words meant to strip him of his dignity, to make him feel like he didn't belong in his own country. And that hurt more than the bruise forming on his face. He knew better than to chase after them. He'd been trained to de-escalate, to walk away, to choose peace whenever possible. So he stayed put, answering the police officer's questions clearly and calmly. He described the couple's clothes, their car, the exact slurs they'd used. He didn't exaggerate. He didn't add drama. He just told it like it happened. Meanwhile, inside the mall, the couple had found a table near the food court. The man was still red-faced, muttering about people, thinking they can do whatever they want. His wife nodded along, fanning herself with a receipt like she'd just survived some great injustice. "We should have called the cops right then," she said, voice sharp. Before he could lie about it, her husband pulled out his phone. "I'm calling now." But before he could dial, something strange happened. A woman at the next table stood up suddenly and moved to the other side of the food court. Then another person, this time a man in a security vest, gave them a long, hard look before walking away. The couple didn't notice at first. They were too busy rehearsing their version of the story in their heads. How they'd been robbed of a parking spot by someone pretending to be disabled. What they didn't know was that the video was already spreading like wildfire. Back in the parking lot, the veteran finished his statement with the officers. One of them, a younger cop who looked like he might have served himself, said quietly, "We'll take this seriously. I promise." There was no doubt in his voice. As the police car pulled away, the veteran finally let out a long breath. He thought about just getting back in his car and driving home. Forget the medicine, forget the errands. But then the teenager came over again. "Hey," he said, "my mom works at the VA clinic downtown. She says if you need anything, legal help, counseling, even just someone to talk to, they've got your back." The veteran looked at him, really looked at him. This kid could have just walked away, posted the video for views and forgotten about it. But he hadn't. He'd stayed. He'd cared. "Thanks," the veteran said. And this time it came from somewhere real. He decided to go into the store after all. Not because he needed the medicine anymore, but because leaving now would feel like letting them win. So he walked in, head high, shoulders straight. People noticed him. Some did double takes, others gave small nods of respect. No one said anything loud, but the silence spoke volumes. Inside the mall, the couple was still sitting at their table, sipping iced teas they didn't really want. The man finally dialed 911, his voice loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Yeah, I want to report an assault." "No, he attacked us. Over a parking spot." "Yeah, he's black. Big guy. Looked like he was faking his disability." But as he spoke, something shifted around them. A group of teens who'd been laughing at a nearby table went quiet. A store manager paused while walking by, listening. Even the cashier at the smoothie stand stopped wiping the counter and stared, because by now, someone at the next table had seen the video too. One of the food court workers, a young woman who'd been watching the whole thing unfold, quietly pulled out her phone and texted her manager. The people at table 12 are the ones from that viral video. The ones who attacked the Navy vet. Within minutes, mall security was alerted. Not to arrest them, there wasn't cause for that yet, but to keep an eye on them. Just in case, the couple had no idea. They were still wrapped up in their own story, convinced they were the victims. They didn't notice the way people avoided sitting near them. They didn't see the security guard standing just a little too close to their table. They certainly didn't realize that their faces were already being shared across thousands of screens. Tagged with words like shameful, racist, and coward. Back outside, the veteran finished his errand and walked slowly to his car. His jaw still ached, but something inside him felt lighter. Not because justice had been served. He knew that would take time, but because he hadn't been alone. Strangers had stood with him. That mattered more than he could say. He got in his car, started the engine, and glanced in the rearview mirror. For a second, he saw not just his own tired eyes, but the faces of everyone who'd stepped up. The teen with the phone, the old woman with the grocery bag, the delivery guy who'd recognized a brother in arms. He drove away, not in anger, not in fear, but with a quiet kind of strength. And just 7 minutes after the last punch had been thrown as he turned onto the main road, 2 plainclothes officers walked into the food court and approached the couple's table. Gerald and Linda Whitmore, one of them asked, voice calm but firm. The man looked up, confused. "Yeah, what's this about?" The officer didn't smile. "We need you to come with us. There's been a report of assault and hate-motivated threats." The woman's iced teacup slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. The veteran never saw that moment. He was already miles away, windows down, ocean breeze in his face. But somewhere deep down he knew, karma doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just shows up, right on time. The video didn't just spread, it exploded. Within minutes of being posted, it was everywhere. Not because it was flashy or edited for drama, but because it was raw, real, and impossible to ignore. A man in pain, standing quietly in a parking lot getting shoved and punched for no reason other than the color of his skin, and doing everything he could not to fight back. People watched it once, then again, then shared it with a single line. This happened today. It started with local Facebook groups, veterans pages, neighborhood watch forums, community boards. Someone recognized the shopping center. Another spotted the veteran's jacket with a small faded unit patch. A retired Navy corpsman commented, "I know that walk. That's one of ours." Soon his identity wasn't a secret, but it wasn't exposed recklessly either. People weren't digging for gossip. They were trying to protect him, to make sure his story was told right. Meanwhile, the couple's silver SUV, with its shiny rims and custom license plate, became the key to everything. A college student studying digital media ran the plate through public records. Nothing illegal, just basic vehicle registration info available in California. Within 20 minutes, their names, jobs, and even their home city were known. Not posted with threats or rage, but with a simple message: this is who did it. Let their employers know. And people did. Gerald worked as a regional manager at a well-known bank. By the time he and his wife were still sitting in the food court, pretending nothing was wrong, his corporate office had already received over 200 calls and emails. Customers were closing accounts. Employees were asking questions. His boss, watching the video on his phone in a meeting, felt his stomach drop. This wasn't just bad behavior. It was a PR nightmare wrapped in hate. Linda, a real estate agent known for her luxury listings and polished Instagram feed, saw her world start to crumble just as fast. Her broker got a flood of messages from clients. Is this really who we're working with? One longtime client canceled a $2 million sale on the spot. Her social media comments filled with people asking, "How can you sell homes to families when you treat people like this?" Her carefully curated online image, smiling at open houses, holding coffee and designer sunglasses, now looked hollow, even cruel, next to the video of her screaming slurs in a parking lot. But the real turning point wasn't the calls or the emails. It was the silence. Friends stopped texting. Neighbors didn't wave when they saw them outside. Their usual lunch spot suddenly didn't have any tables. It was as if the ground beneath them had quietly shifted, and no one told them until they were already falling. Back at home, the veteran had no idea any of this was happening. He'd gone straight to his small house near the coast, poured a glass of water, and sat on his porch listening to the waves. His jaw throbbed, but his mind was finally quiet. He'd done the right thing. He'd stayed calm. He'd reported it. Now he just wanted to rest. His phone buzzed, but not with spam or news alerts. It was a message from a fellow veteran he hadn't heard from in years. Saw what happened. Proud of you for holding your line, brother. Then another. If you need anything, legal, emotional, even someone to mow your lawn, I'm 10 minutes away. Soon, his inbox filled with messages like that, not from strangers looking for a story, but from people who understood what it meant to serve, to suffer, and to still choose peace. He didn't respond to most of them. Not because he didn't appreciate it, but because words felt too small for what he was feeling. Meanwhile, online, something powerful was unfolding. News outlets picked up the story, not the sensational kind, but the local stations that actually cared about their communities. They interviewed bystanders, verified the video, and spoke with police. They didn't exaggerate. They just showed the truth. And the truth was enough. Veterans organizations issued statements. Civil rights groups called for hate crime charges. Even the shopping center put out a message. We stand with those who serve. Acts of hate have no place here. The parking spot where it all happened, they placed a small American flag beside it the next morning, not as a political symbol, but as a quiet reminder of who that space was meant to honor. What made this different from other viral videos was the tone of the response. There was anger, yes, but it wasn't chaotic. It was focused. People weren't calling for violence or doxing. They were demanding accountability. They wanted the system to work the way it was supposed to, fairly, swiftly, and without fear. One of the most shared posts came from a high school teacher who'd been at the mall with her students during the incident. She wrote, "I showed my class the video today, not to scare them, but to teach them." I asked, "What would you have done?" Some said they'd film it. Some said they'd call police. One quiet kid in the back said, "I'd stand next to him. That's the lesson we need." That post got thousands of shares because it wasn't about revenge. It was about courage, the kind that shows up in ordinary moments. As evening fell, the veteran finally checked his phone properly. He saw the news links, the messages, the outpouring of support. He felt overwhelmed, but not in a bad way. It was like the whole community had wrapped its arms around him without him even asking. He thought about the couple. He didn't hate them. He pitied them. Because hate like that, it eats you from the inside. It isolates you. And now, they were alone in a way they'd never been before. He didn't know it yet, but their employers had already made decisions. The bank placed Gerald on immediate leave pending investigation. The real estate firm announced Linda's indefinite suspension. Their faces were no longer just on phones, they were on TV, in newspapers, in conversations at dinner tables across the city, and all of it happened in less than a few hours. The veteran turned off his phone, leaned back in his chair, and watched the sunset paint the sky in oranges and purples. He'd spent years protecting this country overseas. Today, for the first time in a long while, it felt like his country was protecting him too. Not with weapons or laws alone, but with people. Regular people who chose to care, to speak up, to stand together. That night, as the city slept, the video kept spreading, not as a spectacle, but as a mirror. And more people looked into it and decided they wanted to be on the right side of what happened next. 7 minutes. That's all it took, not 7 days, not 7 hours. 7 minutes after the last cruel word was shouted in that parking lot, the world began to shift, not with a bang, but with quiet, unstoppable force. Inside the mall food court, the couple sat at their table, still fuming, still convinced they were the wronged ones. They sipped their drinks, replaying the scene in their heads, polishing their version of the story like it was truth. They didn't notice the way people gave their table a wide berth. They didn't see the mall security guards standing near the trash bins, watching them a little too closely. They certainly didn't hear the hushed whispers passing between store employees. That's them, the ones from the video. Then 2 men in plain clothes walked in, not in uniform, but with that unmistakable calm confidence of people used to handling tense situations. They moved without hurry, but with purpose. One carried a small notepad. The other had a radio clipped to his belt. They stopped at the couple's table. Gerald and Linda Whitmore, the taller one asked, voice low but firm. The man looked up, annoyed. Yeah, what do you want? We're with the San Diego Police Department, the officer said, flashing his badge just long enough to be seen, not flaunted. We need you to come with us. There's been a formal report filed. Assault, battery, and hate-motivated threats. The woman's eyes widened. What? That's ridiculous. He's the one who... Ma'am, the officer cut in gently but firmly. We have multiple witness statements and video evidence. Please stand up and come with us. For the first time, real fear flickered across their faces. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They were supposed to be the victims. They were supposed to get sympathy, not handcuffs. Around them, the food court went quiet. People stopped chewing. A child paused mid-bite. No one cheered. No one laughed. But you could feel the weight of dozens of eyes watching, not with glee, but with something heavier. Relief. Like justice, however small, had finally shown up. They were escorted out through a side exit, away from the main crowd, treated with dignity even as they were being held accountable. That's how it's supposed to work, fair, firm, and without spectacle. Meanwhile, back at his house near the coast, the veteran was just finishing a simple dinner. Grilled chicken, rice, a glass of iced tea. His phone had been buzzing nonstop all afternoon, but he'd let most of it go to voicemail. He wasn't looking for fame. He just wanted peace. Then his landline rang, the old cordless phone he kept for emergencies. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick it up. It was the lead detective on his case. I wanted to let you know personally, the detective said. We've detained the individuals involved. They're being processed. Based on the video, witness accounts, and your statement, we're moving forward with hate crime enhancements under California law. The veteran sat down slowly. He didn't say much, just thank you. But inside, something unclenched. Not because he wanted them punished, but because the system had actually worked. Fast, fair, without him having to beg. Within the hour, both the bank and the real estate agency issued official statements. The bank said Gerald was placed on administrative leave pending a full internal review. The real estate firm went further. We do not tolerate behavior that contradicts our values of respect and inclusion. Linda is suspended indefinitely. Their social media accounts? Deleted or set to private. Their polished online personas gone in a flash. But the real consequence wasn't legal or professional. It was human. Neighbors who used to wave now looked away. A longtime friend sent a short, painful text. I saw the video. I don't know what to say, but I can't pretend this didn't happen. Their church group quietly removed them from volunteer lists. Even their favorite coffee shop barista, who always remembered their order, suddenly didn't see them come in. Isolation settled in faster than they expected. Back in the veterans' neighborhood, the opposite was happening. A local hardware store owner dropped off a care package, pain relievers, ice packs, a handwritten note. From one veteran to another. Rest up. A group of high school students organized a small "thank you for your service" chalk message on the sidewalk outside his gate. Not loud, not performative, just kind. He didn't ask for any of it. But it came anyway. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, he sat on his porch again. The ocean breeze carried the sound of distant waves and children laughing down the street. For the first time all day, he felt calm. Not because the pain was gone, but because he wasn't carrying it alone. He thought about those 7 minutes, how quickly things can change when enough people choose to do the right thing. The teenager who filmed, the bystanders who stepped in, the officers who acted fast, the strangers who spoke up online. None of them knew him personally, but they saw what was happening and they refused to look away. That's the thing about karma. It's not always fire and lightning. Sometimes it's just people deciding all at once that enough is enough. And sometimes it moves faster than anyone expects. By nightfall, local news stations were reporting the arrests, not with sensational headlines but with quiet seriousness. Couple detained after racist assault on disabled veteran. Community leaders called for healing, but also for accountability. Veterans groups announced they'd be offering support, not just to him but to anyone facing discrimination while trying to live their daily lives. He didn't watch the news. He didn't need to. He could feel the shift in the air, like the world had taken a deep breath and chosen to stand a little taller. Inside the police station, the couple sat in separate interview rooms, finally facing the reality of what they'd done. Not just the punch, not just the shove, but the words. The hate behind them. The damage they'd caused in under a minute. And outside, the city kept turning. Cars drove by. Families ate dinner. Kids did homework. Life went on, but something had changed. Because 7 minutes after an act of cruelty, kindness showed up. Justice showed up. Community showed up, and that more than anything was the real strike of karma, not punishment, but proof that goodness still moves faster than hate ever could. Months passed, and the sharp edges of that afternoon in the parking lot began to soften, not because it was forgotten, but because something new had grown from it. The legal process moved steadily, quietly. The couple didn't go to trial, facing clear video evidence, multiple witness statements, and the veteran's calm, consistent account. They accepted a plea deal. They pleaded no contest to charges of assault and violating California's hate crime law. The sentence wasn't dramatic, no prison time, but it carried weight. 300 hours of community service, mandatory anti-bias training, a public written apology published in the local paper, and a permanent mark on their record. Most importantly, they were ordered to attend restorative justice sessions, face-to-face conversations, not with the veteran, he declined that, but with community leaders, veterans advocates, and people who'd experienced similar hate. It wasn't about shame. It was about understanding the real cost of their words and actions. For the veteran, healing came slowly, like tides reshaping a shore. The bruise on his jaw faded within weeks, but the emotional toll lingered longer. There were nights he replayed the slurs in his head, wondering why some people still saw skin before service, before humanity. But those moments grew fewer, because every time doubt crept in, someone reached out. A message from a stranger saying his story gave them courage. A letter from a teacher whose students wrote essays about standing up for others. Even a quiet nod from a fellow veteran at the grocery store. He never wanted to be a symbol. He just wanted to live his life with dignity. But life had other plans. A local veterans organization asked him to speak at a youth leadership event. He almost said no. But then he remembered the teenager who'd filmed the attack. Not for clout, but because it was the right thing to do. So he said yes. Standing in front of a room full of high schoolers, he didn't talk about combat or medals. He talked about restraint, about choosing peace when every instinct screams to fight back. Real strength, he said, voice steady, isn't in how hard you can hit. It's in how much you can endure and still choose kindness. The room was silent. Then one student started clapping. Then another. Soon the whole room rose to their feet. Not because he was a hero, but because he was human. And he'd shown them what integrity looks like in real time. That talk led to more. Not fame, not interviews on national TV, but small, meaningful moments, mentoring at-risk teens, helping design a new training module for mall security teams on de-escalation and bias awareness, even working with city planners to improve signage at accessible parking spots, adding a simple line, reserved for those who served and sacrificed. The shopping center where it all happened became a quiet landmark of change. They installed a small plaque near the entrance, not naming anyone but honoring all who serve, seen and unseen. On Veterans Day, they held a small ceremony. The veteran didn't attend, but he drove by later and saw fresh flowers placed beside the plaque. Someone remembered. Meanwhile, the couple disappeared from public view. They sold their house, moved to a smaller town, kept their heads down. There were no grand apologies on social media, no tearful interviews. But word got around that Gerald started volunteering at a veterans support center. Not for credit, not for show, but as part of his court-ordered service. And Linda, once known for flashy open houses, began quietly helping low-income families find safe housing. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was growth. Either way, they were trying, slowly, imperfectly, to become better. Back in his coastal neighborhood, the veteran finally felt like he could breathe again. He planted a small garden in his backyard, tomatoes, basil, a few sunflowers. Simple things. Good things. On quiet evenings, he'd sit on his porch listening to the ocean, watching the sky change colors. The world still had its ugliness, sure, but it also had so much goodness, often in the smallest gestures. One afternoon, a package arrived at his door. No return address. Inside was a handmade quilt, stitched by a group of retired teachers from a nearby town. Tucked in the folds was a note. You stood your ground so others wouldn't have to. Thank you. He hung it on the back of his couch, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that courage ripples outward, often in ways we never see. The story never became a movie. It didn't need to. It lived in the choices people made afterward. The bystander who now speaks up when they hear a racist joke. The teen who films not for views but for truth. The store manager who trains staff to recognize and prevent harassment. Even the law changed, just a little. Inspired by what happened, a city council member introduced a proposal to strengthen penalties for hate-motivated assaults in public spaces. It passed with broad support. Not because of outrage, but because people finally understood. This wasn't just about one parking spot. It was about who we are when no one's watching and who we choose to be when someone is hurting. The veteran still has bad days. Days when his body aches from old injuries or when a certain tone of voice brings him back to that parking lot. But those days don't define him anymore. What defines him is how he moves forward, with quiet strength, deep compassion, and an unshakable belief that most people, given the chance, will choose to do the right thing. And maybe that's the real lesson of those 7 minutes. Karma didn't strike like lightning. It showed up in human hands, in the teenager with the phone, the stranger with the water bottle, the officer who listened, the community that refused to look away. It wasn't punishment. It was protection. Not just for him, but for everyone who's ever been made to feel like they don't belong. Years from now, people might not remember the exact date or the names involved, but they'll remember the feeling, that moment when a whole community said, "Not here, not like this." And in that moment, something shifted, not just for one man, but for all of us. Because sometimes the most powerful revolutions don't start with speeches or marches. They start with a single act of cruelty, and the quiet collective decision to respond with courage, truth, and grace. And that lasts longer than any headline.